Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. For the first time in a very long time, the only race where we actually have a meta to fight is Race B. It's Group 3, which means it's already pretty close, but the fact that there's no actual fuel or tire wear that you have to worry about means it's even closer, so there's a lot of good options. Let's get into it. The Anti-Meta car of the week is the newest of the AMG GT3s, the 2020. Truth be told, a lot of different cars work this week because there's no tire wear or fuel management to worry about. The AMG has great grip coming out of corners, good acceleration, and it's really stable under braking, which is really important in this track. The one place that really matters is kind of a sketchy place to pass anyway, so you're better off just waiting till the next corner, but we'll get into that when we go over the race. I managed to get a 140.5, but a 0.3 is definitely possible, probably even faster than that. It's really cool to see a lot of different cars on the leaderboard, but the main meta, the Supra, is still obviously the meta, and also the Genesis and Nismo are pretty good as well, so I just wanted to choose something that was fun and we don't really get to use often, so AMG it is. The first corner is actually extremely tough to get right, and it's all about timing. What you want to do is start getting onto the curb initially, and right where the lines start splitting is when you're going to start turning in. What you're going to do is turn in gently and then start adding steering as you're slightly lifting. As you can see, I'm not lifting all of the way, and when I get back on the throttle, I'm taking my time to do it gently, because if you get on the throttle really quickly, you're going to understeer directly into that wall. The next braking zone comes up really quick, so get yourself on the left side of the track, start looking at the meter boards, and right before the 100 meter board ahead is when we're going to start braking. Brake in a straight line and downshift quickly to second gear. You don't want to downshift so quickly that the gears can't even engage, but you've got to do it quick enough that you're actually using the compression braking. Once we're deep into second gear, we're going to start turning in and we're going to downshift to first. What we're going to look for is this red yield sign on the right, and that's our apex. It's really deep in there. Be very gentle on the throttle. If you give it too much throttle at all, you can under or oversteer into the grass and your lap will be completely over then. Make sure you come off the runoff curbing there because the grass will slow you down, but get back on it for this corner. This next corner is really tricky for a number of reasons. Firstly, you don't have a really concrete spot to look at for your braking marker, so we're going to look at the barrier on the right, and right where there's a break between the wall, that's when you're going to start turning in. The goal as you turn in is to turn in a way that you'll very much easily miss the barrier, but then brush the brakes just enough so that you tuck yourself onto the other side of it and miss going off into the grass. Apexing too early or getting on the throttle too early can send you into that grass, and if you do hit the grass but miss the barrier, keep the wheel straight as the right tires on the concrete will be moving faster and will start to rotate you. If you start turning with the corner, you're going to spin around. The best plan is to obviously miss it, but don't give up just because you put two tires in the grass. In my opinion, the next corner is the hardest on the track, and it gives you a preview of what you need to do on the final corner. As you get to the end of the fencing on the right where this triangle sign is, we're going to start turning in just a little bit. At the end of the orange and blue barriers on the left is when we're going to start braking, but you're only going to brake enough so that you can get yourself lined up with the side of the track on the other side of this corner. Brake gently as you navigate yourself around this corner, but when you see the stop sign here on the left, we're going to go to full brake. If you're not fully completely lined up with the left side of the track, it's not the end of the world, but you want to be very close to the left side. The end of the concrete runoff on the left is a really good place to start turning in. You're going to need to get all the way down to first gear for the rotation, though second gear could work. I really like first gear. Keep your eyes on the light post on the other side of the corner. That is where we're going to apex, and you're going to be in second gear before you get on the throttle. Once again, you have to be very careful because coming from a slow speed corner, this car is torquey enough that you can under or oversteer pretty easily. This next section is incredibly long, and it's not straight, but it is full throttle, so you've got to really make sure that you don't slide the tires coming out of that last corner. Get yourself to the right side of the track, and when you get underneath the inflatable Gran Turismo sign, you can start turning in. You want to align yourself with the left side of the track as early as you can. Right about when you get to the fence before these marshals here on the left is when you're going to brake. Start turning in at the end of the colored barrier on the right, and make sure you're coming off the brakes because if you stay too hard on the brakes, you'll actually understeer a lot here. I understeered a little bit and missed the apex, which cost me about 2/10 here. If you're close enough to the inside barrier, you can get on the throttle once you're past facing the marshals. While it's better not to slide at all, oversteer seems to be a faster option in that corner. For this next corner, once we get all the way up onto the concrete runoff and you've got both of your tires onto it, that's when we're going to start hitting the brakes. Turn in before the end of the runoff, and I would suggest not actually touching the curb. Getting as close to it as you can is good, but if you hit it, you'll probably bounce, which is going to make it really difficult to get the traction out of the corner. Wait until the tires really hook up and you straighten the wheel right towards the middle of the track before getting on full throttle, but when you get to the end of the grass on the left, we're going to start turning in, upshift, and then gently get on the throttle trying to hit this apex right here. If you turn too much or get on the throttle too quickly, you can slide really easily, so just be really patient there. You can find a lot of time if you can hook up the tires really easily, but it's better not to slide, so just be very gentle until you're really used to it. Staying full throttle at the end of the curb on the left, we're going to start turning in, aiming for this inside curb right here. I like to ride up on the curb but completely avoid the grass. I look in the distance for this division in the barrier ahead, and that's when I start changing direction. Once the weight is settled on the right, I add a little bit of brake just like that tight corner I mentioned before, and at the end of the curbing on the left is when I go full brake, again trying to get as close to the left as I can, but not worrying about doing it perfectly. At the beginning of the curb on the right, I turn in sharply, and if I feel any understeer, I actually go all the way to first gear, but then pop it back up to second before I get on the throttle. The apex here is deceptively early because you can actually get on the throttle and go all the way out to the blue runoff as long as 2 tires are still touching the red and white portion of the curb. To fully maximize the end of the lap, make sure you're turning right so you line up with the right side of the track here, and then it's a straight shot all the way to the end. Alright, that one's actually really tough. Let's go and watch it full speed. I didn't mention this at all during the breakdown, but if you're able to touch just a little bit of the grass on the inside, then you can get the car to rotate, but it's actually super difficult to get it right without then understeering and hitting the wall, so I just try to avoid it in general. It can be used though. You've got to be really patient and make sure you really get your speed down. I see a lot of people slide just barely beyond the apex here, and it takes them so long to get back on the throttle. If you don't slide whatsoever, it's going to be much better for you. This really quick right-hand corner is probably, you know what, all of the corners are tough. That one's especially tough because if you don't get super close to the barrier, you're going to go too slow, but of course if you hit it, then you might ruin your race. Brake just enough to continue steering until you're lined up where you want to be, and then get heavy on the brake there. You need to really slow down again because it's a really slow corner, but you're lucky this car is super stable. There are a lot of cars that will actually just completely spin if you give too much brake, so you really don't have to worry about understeer going into that corner with this car, and that's much more manageable. If you end up sliding the rear out, then you're pretty much toast. Like I mentioned before, I completely missed the apex here, but I think it's because I was either braking too much and or turning in too late. For this next corner, you've got to turn in really soon after you get on the brakes, and if you're still braking too hard as you turn in, you can understeer, and understeer begets oversteer. Oversteer can be a really big issue with this corner anyway, so you don't want to give it any more reason to slide out, so just be very patient on the turn in and the throttle application. Carrying a lot of speed up to the braking point is just like that other really sketchy braking point, but a lot of people are not going to take it this exact same way, so be very careful when you're following closely. Other people brake a lot earlier than that and then brake again, so yeah, just keep your heads up. This is a really tough track to learn. It is a PD original, so just be really patient with yourself. It's going to take a while. Since this is Race B, there are no tire or fuel requirements to really consider, and if you didn't know this before now, Race B actually never has anything except 1 times tire and 1 times fuel. I might actually be wrong saying never, but I've been playing this since the beta of GT Sport, and I don't remember Race B ever having anything except 1x tire and 1x fuel. Not having tire and fuel strategy does not mean that there's no strategy in a race. You still have to know what your car's capabilities are, what your opponent's capabilities are, and you also need to know when things can get really dangerous. I bet if you've done even a single lap so far, you've probably hit the wall on the very first corner, so you can imagine if you're hitting that wall just during the time trial, what's going to happen with other people in the race. On top of that, anytime you have a public lobby and a very fast section followed by an incredibly slow corner, then you know you're going to get the Monza effect. Knowing when to be really aggressive and when to be more conservative with your approach to trying to pass people in these corners is obviously a skill that you'll learn with lots of experience. It's also just random. You never know who might crash in front of you, so it is a gamble following people closely whatsoever. You don't really have a choice if you want to make overtakes though, so this race itself is just a gamble. If people defend on the inside at the beginning of the race, I always just let them, and if they're not defending, I move to the inside not so I can get some kind of dive opportunity, but so I can try to avoid any kind of accordion effect, kind of like that. Luckily that one wasn't bad at all. I didn't take any damage, which means that the people ahead probably didn't take any damage either, so no harm, no foul. This next corner is a massive choke point. I got extremely lucky being able to pull off this move here, and luckily the guy in the M6 was also paying a lot of attention and just moved away because he knew I had a ton of momentum. I didn't really know anything about this guy, so I just positioned myself in the middle, and when it looked like he was going to be all the way on the outside, I went ahead and went for a move, and it worked out. If you can trust someone who's racing behind you not to run into you, you might still want to give them the inside, just because if you're on the outside, you're going to be able to get on the throttle a lot earlier. I was really lucky that, especially with him in a Supra, I was able to get out really quickly, but I did again have to defend going into this corner. I like defending in the middle right there because it forces them to make a decision. If they're going to go on the outside, then they're going to have to try to make sure that I don't track out on them or just get to the exit before they do. If they go on the inside, it's going to be really difficult to bleed off enough speed and get a good exit towards the next corner. I was really lucky here because the guy behind is in a Supra, and if I didn't have the slipstream from the guys ahead, since this car's weakness is the top speed, there's a chance that he could get a really good exit and then pass me before that first corner. If someone's coming up really quickly on the front straight, I always go to the inside because if they're going to be on the outside, they know they're going to be in the more dangerous position. I'm always going to give people space, but I know that a lot of people are just going to lift off instead of trying to fight me for the corner. This doesn't always work though, so be very careful. If you know the person that you're about to try to pass on the inside or that you're defending from on the inside is going to be really aggressive, then it might be better just to give them the position, because if they crash there, your race is probably done. Since that Porsche did just completely concede that corner, I thought I was probably safe to just brake on the normal line and then try to make sure that I could get a good exit and then run away from them. One more consideration that I didn't really talk about is the dirty air. Dirty air has not been that bad in this race, so you can still really confidently hit that corner, but if you're really close to someone, you might want to go a little bit slower or just give yourself a little bit of extra time to get on the throttle. The combination of slipstream and dirty air can make it really difficult to hit your marks in this corner. If you've got someone really aggressive behind you, I'd suggest making sure that you wait until you're all the way lined up on the left to give them space just in case they miss their brakes. So I got really lucky here, and I don't think we're really going to get this lucky all the time. The Sage guy just completely gave me the line, though it was well within his rights to close it off. Because of that, I got all the way next to him, and then I defended, of course, and the GTR crashing completely ruined his exit. I think I had that corner anyways, but the GTR really sealed the deal. As you can see from the Delta, I'm not quite close enough to utilize the slipstream of the cars in front, and having a hard charging Supra behind us can be kind of scary, especially in a car that doesn't have a really good top speed. So I was trying to focus on nailing this last sector as much as I could so I can get really close to him, and since he's in a Porsche, if I got the slipstream and a good exit, then I was going to be able to stay with him the entire way down. This is probably common knowledge, but the closer you are to the car in front, the better the slipstream works. Since I was only half a second behind the guy in front, and the Supra was now a full second behind me, even with that slipstream, he wasn't going to be able to catch me before the first kink. The guy in front is about 4/10 ahead, and that right there is very good because this is what I've been talking about. That was a big jump scare. He completely missed the turn in, hit the wall, and if the game didn't ghost immediately, I would have gone right into his car, and that would be game over for me. With only one lap after this one and a 1.6 second gap to the guy ahead, we're going to have to jump forward to the next bit of action. It took the entirety of that last lap to cut 6/10 out of his lead, but doing so was perfect timing because I was able to get within his slipstream right after that left-hand kink, which meant that I didn't have to worry about dirty air on that corner, which is super scary. The brakes on the AMG are incredible, so I knew that as long as I nailed this next corner, which can be tough with this dirty air, then I was going to have a shot at him at the next straight. It looks like he made a little bit of a mistake there, but I knew from the fact that it took so long to catch up to him, he had good pace, so I could trust him in this corner. At least I thought I did, and I was not wrong. He did end up braking a little bit late, but it was only just enough that he stayed on track and I was barely able to get in front. Like I've been saying, he clearly had pretty good pace, so I was not about to relax. I planned on trying to use the slipstream from the Corvette ahead, but of course I was going to defend going into this next corner, especially since he got such a good launch after making that mistake that he was already almost on my tail. Keeping an eye on my radar, he braked super deep, but it is a Porsche, and this corner is really good for the Porsches, so I was able just to barely get ahead, and that did solidify my lead. I ended up being really lucky that that guy was as good as he was, because clearly it took me a while to cut out the gap between us, and even though he did make a mistake, he recovered extremely well to the point that he had a real shot at passing me on that last corner. When he went for the attack, he was clean, we gave each other space, and honestly, that is why I love racing, so shout out to that guy. Now here's the main reason I do not like Race B. It's so short. It's actually a really fun race, and I would have loved it if it was longer, but since it's only 4 laps, the best we could do is 7th place. I'm hoping for next week we get a much longer Race C that has a meta car that we can actually fight. I obviously don't necessarily like there being a really big meta, but I like the chance to fight it, and I like the longer races, so fingers crossed. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you haven't seen yet, I've also made a couple guides for the first 2 licenses in the Master License Test. I'll be finishing that series, and of course, I'll be making another one of these anti-meta Meta Club videos every single week, so don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.